Yeah, so the biggest piece I would say is you're not alone. I think, especially in divorce, we're taught that it's such a taboo subject and people tend to run the other way. I actually have a Facebook and Instagram series I used to do called Dear Friend, and it starts out with, I promise this isn't the plague. I promise you can't catch this. Because that's one thing I realized when I went through it is everybody, even people that I have been friends with for a very long time, ran the other way. And it was a very lonely, dark place. So anyone going through a divorce currently or a dark season, know you're not alone. And one of the biggest things that was the smallest thing I ever did and still do today is every morning when I wake up, I think of 3 things I'm grateful for and I write them down. Sometimes it's 5, but usually at least 3. And what it has done or did for me starts to train my brain to look for the positive throughout the day subconsciously instead of focusing on the negative. Because right now, if you're in the midst of a dark season, it's dark. There is a lot of negative that you can find, but I promise you, there is some positivity within there. And once you start I don't even care if you wake up and you are grateful for the pillow your head's on or the bed or, the simplest things like that, because it's just retraining your brain to look throughout the day for grateful things.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Living in the Next Chapter. I have somebody from the beautiful state of Florida joining us today, fresh off of a great July 4th weekend, and happy to have Ashley Abramson with me today. Ashley's here on Living in the Next Chapter. Nice to see you. How are you?
Good. I'm so glad to be here, David. Thank you so much for having me.
And we have a mutual comrade. Bridget is in our corner. She's sending me great people, great authors have them podcasts. She's helping you with co-writing books. Tell me about working with Bridget. She won't hear this. So we can say anything we want. Tell me about working with Bridget. How did you find Bridget, first of all?
Oh, well, so my first mentor, I call her my soul sister. She actually wrote a co-authored book with Bridget as well. And then shortly after she did that, there was a book coming out called Lineage Speaks. And a lot of my journey has been about healing my inner child. And my father committed suicide at 18. And I've really changed the trajectory of, our previous generations and then generations to come by healing myself. So she really felt that my story should be in Lineage Speaks. And it was interesting because usually I tend to procrastinate a lot. And there was like a couple weeks left to hand in the application to be in this book. And literally within 3 hours of her saying that, I filled out the application, sent it off to Bridget. Bridget responded. And now we're 3 books in and I plan to write my own book with Bridget. So the rest is history. That's kind of how Bridget landed in my lap.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great. Can you share a little bit about that chapter that you wrote with us a little bit? Give us an idea of maybe a little bit more of that story. That's fascinating, really.
Yeah. So Lineage Speaks is all about women carrying the torch for past and future generations. So like I said earlier, kind of healing ourselves, because when we heal ourselves, it heals, the generations prior, that trauma that gets carried on, but then it also doesn't get passed down to the generations to come. So right before I wrote that chapter, it was my first ever experience in writing. And I'll be honest with you, writing was my least favorite thing growing up in school. In college, I always would put it off till the last minute and just like splat it all up. But I always got A's, and my mom's an amazing writer. But it just was never something that really interested in me, but I wanted to get my story out there. So right before that, Bridget and my friend Jess recommended that I listen to the book Big Magic. And that's written by the lady who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And in there, she talks about how she wrote tons of books prior to Eat, Pray, Love, and nobody has any clue what they are. And when she wrote those, like her intention was that she wanted them to be best-selling, all of this stuff, but of course they weren't. And then Eat, Pray, Love, she just wrote for her own healing journey. it was not meant to make a big impact at all. It was just for her to heal. And then it became this huge success who now, Julia Roberts plays it and everything else. So I was listening to that book and I hadn't figured out exactly what my chapter looked like yet. And I messaged Bridget because it came to my mind that I wanted to write a final letter to my father who committed suicide. So that chapter was just about my healing. It was about closure with my father and really sharing with him what our journey was like from my perspective, both on earth and then now after. That's why I named my chapter Earthly Hugs and Soul Kisses. And yeah, that's my chapter is literally a letter to my father talking about our journey together here on earth, how that impacted me, how that impacted, how I was after he passed away and, going through my divorce without having a father. That's what my chapter is all about. And it was so healing. And the really interesting thing is that Lineage Speaks, one of the amazing authors I co-authored with, her husband does like video editing and stuff like that. So he offered and did it for our book, which now he does it as a paid thing to turn it into kind of an audio book, but through podcast platform. Oh. So each of us authors got to read our chapter and he edited it. So if you go to any podcast platform, Lineage Speaks podcast, the podcast has each, almost all of the authors reading their own chapter. There was a couple authors that didn't feel comfortable. So another author stepped in and read it for them. But I remember rereading it out loud and it was another healing stage for me as well. It was just so interesting. It was almost like I didn't remember writing it.
Wow. So you have your own episode then for your chapter. Wow. So I'm gonna put a link for that in the show notes because people really need to go hear this. Because that's so as you're reading this, did it bring everything back up for you? Was it just a confirmation? Was it like you talk about more healing, but hearing it out loud as you read this words for this podcast episode, how did that help you then?
So I think in writing the chapter, it was very much so closure of being able to share my story with my father. And then reading it out loud, it was like this deeper sense of healing, a deeper understanding that the story is out there, that my father received my interpretation of what occurred. He knows what's going on. It's really hard to explain, especially when you're, healing just in general. But I just know it was this wholeness I felt and I felt like I was going to start crying multiple times, but it was not tears of sadness. It was tears of gratitude and love. And that's what the tears felt more like. Almost a happiness, a contentment, like a gratitude feeling.
Awesome. Okay. So the other authors too in that book, then they're all writing about different things, or is there kind of a general theme to the entire book?
So the general theme is women carrying the torch for past and future generations. Okay. So it's people's journey of healing or really stepping into their authentic self. It's a lot of healing. Yeah.
So did you have a chance to go through the other chapters yourself and read them or listen to them on that podcast or something and kind of connect with those authors as well?
I did. And it was really cool. That's what I love about starting off as co-authoring a book. First of all, like going from never writing anything other than forced papers or even posts on social media to jumping into, 80,000 words is very scary. Co-authoring a book gave me the opportunity to be with a group of other women going through the same thing, but it was like a limited amount of words, which at first I thought was good, but I can tell you more about how that's a struggle also later. But you build this sisterhood, this deep, intimate relationship because we are sharing a part of our soul in this book and we will forever live together in these pages.
Yeah.
So we've built amazing friendships and just this sisterhood. Like still today, we have a message string on Facebook, and it's the Lineage Speaks message string. And just the other day, one of my co-authors was offering us a free Kundalini yoga session to her fellow authors. So it's just this community that continues on. And a lot of us have wrote multiple books with Bridget. So we may be published in the pages of Lineage Speaks. And then I'm with a lot of the authors that were in that book now again in Divinity Speaks. So it's really cool.
Nice. Well, so as a new author who maybe is struggling to find the initiative to get going, maybe writing in a co-author space would be a great starting spot.
Yeah, I think it's super amazing because you don't deal with really any of the logistics, but you get the understanding. Bridget also provides Zoom calls where she kind of gives prompts and helps you dig deep and really understand what you want to write about. Like she helps with that writing process, but then also you get to understand what it's like to have a deadline, what it's like to have a limit, what it's like to try to create your message so that it is received by others. And then you also get the experience of interacting with an editor. So then your stuff comes back and you get to see, and it also helps you with your writing because you're like, oh, this makes more sense how they wrote that. So then in the future, you can remember that and refer back to it. And the amount of time is so much less that you need to commit to this. And like to write a book, I mean, if you have a family and a full-time job, that's a big thing to take on.
Yeah.
But 3,000 words is very much doable because Bridget also gives us a good amount of time from the time we sign up to the time everything needs to be handed in to the time that edits come back and then being published. She's very gracious with all of us and knows life happens, but also leaves room for that buffer.
Nice. And there's still some accountability there. She's there to make sure you're on time and get the stuff in.
Oh, yeah.
And, right. She's helping you to kind of be motivated as well. Because I know some
100%.
authors I've spoke to, they may lose a little bit of motivation about halfway through. You know, they don't write every day anymore. They kind of get to it when they get to it, you know, but that motivation, having somebody with a timeline always kind of helps push you forward, right?
Oh, that's huge. I probably would have never wrote my chapters if I hadn't like already committed to this and had a timeline. Yeah. And literally, even with the timeline, I waited till the last couple of days to write my chapter. And I know a lot of other authors did as well. And that's exactly why writing my own book, my plan is to hire Bridget for that accountability so that I have someone that continues to push me forward. Because like you said, a lot of authors will write very beautiful messages that, you know, the world needs to hear, but they get halfway through and it's just burnout. It's like, I'm done writing.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier something about how you had to kind of limit your words. Like, did you get to the point where you had too many and you had to cut back?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So now it being my third chapter, I can see some things that occur the same, some not coincidences. Do you know what I mean? Oh, some patterns. Sorry, that's the word. Yeah. So I can see some patterns because I have 3 different times. So I know it's patterns. And one of them is, for me at least, it'll be really hard sometimes to get to 1,500 words. Like, you know, you get your message out and then you're only at 800. But once you go past 1,500, you're like, oh my gosh, I need way more than 3,000 words. Like 3,000 words isn't going to cover everything I want to cover. So it's like this area you get to where it's like, once you get past 1,500, you could end up with thousands and thousands and thousands. But then you have to figure out how to condense your message into 3,000 words or less, or around 3,000, which has been a really interesting process. I think I handed my last chapter into the editor with like 3,600 words, knowing I would have to cut it down, but just asking her for assistance. Can you please, you know, use your skills? And it was really cool to see that because she got it from, I think, around 3,600 words down to 3,111 words. So so we have to limit ourselves.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's the side of writing that I wouldn't see. I wouldn't understand. You just see this book and you're thinking, how hard can this be? It is very difficult just to capture everything. And then I guess when you're all done and you submit everything and everything's printed, like the theme of our podcast name, that we're living that next chapter every day. you always still have new thoughts. You have new things you could say. You could have new things that you could have written to your father in that first co-author book,
Yep.
right? There's additional thoughts or whatever. And you just kind of live that process of writing all the time. And so many authors I find don't stop at one book, because now that they've unlocked this ability to capture their thoughts and portray them through written form, now they want to do more and more and more. It just kind of opens that door, right?
Yeah. I mean, the process still, I wouldn't say I necessarily love it, but I love the outcome. I love the message. I love sharing my story so that other people feel safe in sharing their story or don't feel so alone. But yeah, I mean, I've done all 3 of these books in less than a year, 3 chapters. So it's definitely something, once you kind of get in that and know it's possible, that you're like, okay, I'll do another one, another chapter. So
it's a big leap though, from one chapter in a book co-authoring to your own book. So tell me about that big leap. That's got to be a little different.
Yeah. So I've always actually wanted to write my own book, even though I didn't like writing. In college, I said I was going to write a book called Making Lemonade from Lemons. And it was going to be all about like the mental health history within my family and how I've healed it and everything else. So walking into this book doesn't feel like a new thing. The title and stuff, Divorced Not Destroyed, is definitely different. But the cool thing is all of the chapters in Lineage Speaks, and then Where Social Work Can Lead You, and now Divinity Speaks, for me, each chapter, it's a healing journey. And if you read them sequentially, you can see the different stages of my healing. So in fact, I have 9,000 words already of my book, because it is my story. It is my path to kind of spark to get the rest of the words out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And not to mention, for the last probably 3 years, going through my healing journey, I get random thoughts in my head about, I'd really like to share this in my book or that or whatever. So in my cell phone, I have tons of Google Notes about chapter ideas and, takeaways and things like that I want to make sure to cover within there.
So you're using that as a note-taking system. That's really smart, because it's with you all the time. And instead of trusting your memory, trust the app. Yeah. The app will take care of it, right?
Right. And that's a big thing too, that book I talked about, which I would recommend anyone listening to this who is an aspiring author, even a current author, if you haven't listened to the book yet, Big Magic. And I do not know the author's name right now, but she's the author of Eat, Pray, Love. But it talks about that as well, that ideas come into our mind. And have you ever had that where you're like, oh, this is a really great idea. You're like, I'm going to write it down later when I get home, and you cannot remember it to save your life.
Yeah.
She talks about that and how important it is to train and to let your brain know that you are going to act upon these ideas or you will lose them. So listening to that has also created, even if it's an idea that I'm like, I'm not sure if this resonates with me, I immediately write it down. I look at it later and I'm like, if this doesn't resonate with me, I thank myself for coming up with this idea, but it doesn't really align with who I am right now. Or if it does, then I put it in an area that I know I can reference later. But Big Magic is a beautiful book about just creativity in general.
That's definitely what I'm going to add to my list. I like that. I love getting other authors recommending books. That's good. I got to add that one to my list. And Eat, Pray, Love too. I have that as well. That's really good.
Oh yeah, that's so good.
So your book is focused on your journey through divorce, but coming out the other side of it, not being, like as your title says, not being destroyed. So what is the overarching theme to the book, as far as how is it going to help people who read this, where they might identify with, as you have in a divorce setting? What is your hope for this book?
So my hope is that not only can be a good tool for people going through a divorce, but a good tool for any woman who has gone through something impactful in life recently, and is just really stuck. Because I think, it could be a death, it could be a loss of a job. I think all of those very much can present themselves the same in how our healing journey looks. So it's going to be, there's so much left in laying this out. So this is my vision. My vision is it's going to be a very fun book, because I'm all about inner child and things like that, but there's going to be a lot of darkness in it as well. So it'll be this good combination of really showing the truth of what it looks like when you're in the depths of the darkness, but with a light side to it that is through the lens of my journey, but provides takeaways that anyone can go do themselves to get themselves on their own healing journey and to move through something like this if they don't have someone who can walk them through that.
Nice. Because it's not watered down. It's not something that people can't relate to. It's something that's designed to help people, right? And designed to be a realistic view.
Yeah. I'm going to be open and raw and 100% transparent. I'm sure there will be family members that will not appreciate my book, but it's my truth. So, and I think that's a big thing that aspiring writers or current writers really struggle with. And I know I saw that a lot within my books, especially when we're sharing healing our lineage, because that tends to, impact our family. And, every family wants to pretend as though it is perfect. And my favorite magnet I used to have is the only normal people are the people you don't know yet. There's no such thing as normal people. So that can be really hard. But the biggest thing that I always remind people is that you're not saying that what you're sharing is 100% truth. You're saying it's your truth. And we all, when we walk through different stages of our life, we all interpret it differently because we all have our own lens, but we all should be respected for our own truth. As long as we're not trying to push on someone else, but we have the ability to share our own truth through our own lens, as long as it is not the intention to hurt someone else or to cause any sort of harm or pain to someone else.
Interesting. So can you give us kind of a little bit of a sneak peek preview into what you're writing? If there's a listener listening and they're in the midst of a divorce or potential divorce and they're in that dark space right now, can you kind of speak to that listener who might be curious about your new book?
Yeah. So the biggest piece I would say is you're not alone. I think especially in divorce, we're taught that it's such a taboo subject and people tend to run the other way. I actually have a Facebook and Instagram series I used to do called Dear Friend. And it starts out with, I promise this isn't the plague. I promise you can't catch this. Because that's one thing I realized when I went through it is everybody, even people that I have been friends with for a very long time, ran the other way.
Really?
And it was a very lonely, dark place. So anyone going through a divorce currently or a dark season, know you're not alone. And one of the biggest things that was the smallest thing I ever did and still do today is every morning when I wake up, I think of 3 things I'm grateful for and I write them down. Sometimes it's 5, but usually at least 3. And what it has done or did for me starts to train my brain to look for the positive throughout the day subconsciously instead of focusing on the negative. Because right now, if you're in the midst of a dark season, it's dark. There is a lot of negative that you can find, but I promise you, there is some positivity within there. And once you start I don't even care if you wake up and you are grateful for the pillow your head's on or the bed or, the simplest things like that, because it's just retraining your brain to look throughout the day for grateful things.
Wow. So yeah, whatever you focus your mind on, your mind focuses on that,
Yeah.
and it will feed you that. So if you focus on negativity or darkness or doubts or any of that stuff, that's what your mind will just say, well, if you're interested in that, then we're going to keep feeding you all those negative thoughts. But like
Yep.
you said, if you focus on the positive, then your mind's going to focus on that as well and feed you that during the day. It's very
Yep.
smart, very powerful, and something very practical that people can do right now.
Yep, exactly.
That's great.
And when I really realized like how big the impact was that was happening is I started waking up in the morning, and before my eyes even open, like as my brain like just registered back, I immediately started thinking about what I was grateful for.
Yeah. And then it becomes a habit, and a habit becomes a lifestyle, and then you just continue from there, right?
Exactly.
That's powerful. That's really good. I love that, Ashley. That's something that I can do that tomorrow. It's great. Yeah, I love that. That's really good. That's a real practical thing to do. So that book is coming out later, sometime this year, maybe early next year, you're thinking?
Yes, that is my plan. Like right now, I'm at the very early stages, we're just at the point where I have all these notes in my phone. I've had a short call with Bridget, looking at getting things aligned. So hopefully we can really start hitting the ground running come September. And at that point, I'll be writing, I think, a chapter a week. So around 4,000 words a week will be the goal. Bridget will be holding me accountable. The other cool thing with her is she knows a lot about human design. I'm a generator, so I need to respond to things. So we're setting up, she'll set up for me kind of prompts for me to respond to when I'm writing and help me create that. So I'm really, really excited for that and scared all at the same time, right? Like writing your own book, like that's you. No other authors are on that Amazon page with you. It's just you.
Yeah, just you. Go. And it's nice that you have somebody in your corner. Like I mentioned, we had Bridget on the podcast. I'll be coming up soon, and she's so amazing. She's so nice to talk to. And the fact that she's writing her own book as well, like who better to go to and have in your corner is somebody that's actually doing the same thing you are. That's a great connection. And I love your idea of starting out in co-authoring as a starting point. If you're not really sure about how to get started, that's a great way to start. And then having a book coach like that and somebody that can help you, super smart way to do that. And I hope that many authors that are listening get inspired by that and will be listening and waiting for your next book, because that's going to be exciting. So can we make a promise to come back and talk when the book is done or close to being done?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe we could do like a midway and then right before launch or something.
Sure. That would be great. So I'll help you be accountable too. I'm no Bridget, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, because this would be right at the very beginning. It could be a whole journey series.
Wow. Hey, I love it.
I'm 100% in, David.
Okay. All right. I'm signing up. I'm going to focus on the good things in life. And that's going to be new podcasts with you coming up in the future. Yes. So that's really
sounds great.
Okay. So if there's somebody who wants to reach out to you, they want to get in touch with you, is there something that can they follow you on social media? How can people get in touch?
So on Instagram, I'm @ASH_Abramson. Okay. I am Ashley Abramson on Facebook. You can email me at ashley@coachwithashley.net. And it will be up soon, but I just created a freebie, the Fear Finder Formula, to find whatever fears are holding you back in life, within your relationships, and whatever it may be. So you can go to my website, coachwithashley.net, and download that within the next couple weeks. And send me an email. I love to chat. Send me a direct message if you have any questions or comments. I love connecting with people.
Send Ashley a message and say you heard her on the Living the Next Chapter podcast.
Yes.
And that you can't wait for the new book and the next podcast episode. And go there to her website and make sure you connect. Super amazing. Awesome. Ashley, thank you so much for taking time today.
Yes, thank you.
And you should be writing right now, but you're taking time for a podcast. So we won't tell Bridget. Again, she won't hear this. She'll have no idea, right? We won't share this with her. But yeah, awesome to have you with us, and looking forward to having an ongoing conversation.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, David.
Thanks for inspiring us today.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Cheers. Hey guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Jump over to livingthenextchapter.com, our website, and you will see a spot where you can leave a voice message. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to hear from you. So if you want your voice on this podcast, yes, that's possible. Go to livingthenextchapter.com, click the little microphone icon, leave a voice message. And we'll insert your message into the podcast. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell us your favorite guest. Maybe there's a guest we should have on the podcast. Maybe you should be our next guest. Leave us a message on livingthenextchapter.com. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please share this podcast episode with one person. That's all we're asking. Meet you over there at livingthenextchapter.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Love to hear from you. Till the next episode. It's coming up right away. Be sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Thank you for supporting our guests. Have a great day.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.